Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. It's great. Dustin, I think this is going to be one epic conversation, that's for sure. So I am very excited about everything that we're going to dive into. And you know what? I love to let my guests just introduce themselves and give that little background, and we'll bounce from there. So
Awesome.
take
Yeah,
it.
well, thanks for having me, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here. And as we were pre-recording, we know a lot of the same people, and it's funny how these entrepreneurial circles are very small circles in many ways. So yeah, my name's Dustin Riechmann. Been married 23 years, have 3 kids. That's a big part of my identity and what drives me. And then in my entrepreneurial journey, which I'm sure we'll unpack, my current focus is a company called 7-Figure Leap, where we help mission-driven entrepreneurs grow 7-figure brands by telling their story. And so a big part of how we do that is what I'm doing today, which is podcast guesting. For about 16 years, I had an engineering career. So I have 2 degrees in civil engineering and got into the specialty of traffic engineering and was building and leading teams doing that, and just basically got burnt out of it and just felt like I kind of hit what I could do there. And so in the last 7 years of that career, I was also doing online side hustles, basically. So in 2009, I created a website called Engaged Marriage, which grew out of marriage ministry that my wife and I were involved in our church. And so just like, man, this needs to be online. It was like the heyday of blogging. So I just got on there, learned how to create a website, started writing, ended up writing a book and doing speaking. And that really pulled me deeper into the world of digital marketing to grow that business. So around 2015, I really got deep into digital marketing and kind of declared unofficially that I want to eventually leave engineering and do this full time, but I wasn't ready to do that. My wife was a stay-at-home mom at that time to 3 kids, and I had all the breadwinning and all the insurance and all that stuff. But what I did start to do is take on freelance clients. So for a couple year period there, I was engineering, engaged marriage, and taking on marketing clients to kind of build the war chest to be able to make this full leap. So I made the full leap at the end of 2017 and was just living life and had a bunch of different marketing clients, still had engaged marriage running. Ended up meeting someone who was a local butcher who owned the butcher shops that I was helping him market locally. And then he said, "Hey, do you know how to sell stuff online?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah, I
We
think so.
ended up forming a partnership in a company called Fire Creek Snacks, which brought me into the world of like e-commerce and going to trade shows and learning brick and mortar and all the different things that entails. So it really made me much more well-rounded in my entrepreneurial acumen. So I was doing that for a couple of years. And then this little thing called COVID happened in 2020 and rocked my world in a really big way. I was actually driving to a trade show for Fire Creek Snacks and it was canceled. And then when I got home, I lost about 80% of my revenue from my marketing clients because they were like my dentist, my real estate broker, a restaurant. They're like local clients that were all shut down in the state of Illinois for an
Oh,
extended period of
wow.
time.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. My wife and kids were all home because my wife had just taken a new position and went back to work as a special ed teacher. So that was a saving grace. But they're all home. I couldn't leave. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. We were really on a roll with this marketing that we were doing for Fire Creek, and I thought there's got to be a way to do this from home. And that's what pulled me into podcast guesting for myself. So podcast guesting became a part of what I was doing in 2020. I started doing that a lot and had a lot of success with it and growing that brand. Then by 2021, people started to notice and say, "Can you help me with that?" So I kind of got pulled into the world of coaching without intending to. And then I did a bunch of one-on-one coaching engagements, found out I really loved it. And then in 2022, that evolved into small groups. And then that eventually evolved into a more full mastermind experience, which is really what I do now is I lead smaller groups of entrepreneurs who are basically going from 6 to 7 figures in their business. And I help them co-create a podcast guesting system to fuel that growth. So that is engineering, marriage, marketing, meat sticks, and now masterminds.
I love it. Isn't it funny though that number one, a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, and probably you would agree as well, that they almost stumbled into the business that they create and filling a need. You
Yes.
create it out of that, and people like organically come to you when you don't realize that you're good at something.
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
people, I get that question sometimes, like, why'd you go to engineering school and now you're like, what do you do? Like, no one is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
I was
but
like,
isn't
well,
there a common thread in
yeah,
engineering?
exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's
yeah. Like,
all problem solving. And like for me, even when I've helped people with marketing or selling a meat stick to a retailer, like what I'm trying to do is solve a problem for them, right? And so that's how I position everything. That's how I create the messaging. And so even when I look back at my engineering career, it was while I was worked for someone else. I was a partner in both the firms I worked for at some point in both of those engagements. So it was a little bit entrepreneurial. But the thing that really, when I said burnt out, it really wasn't so much that I didn't like what I was doing. It was like, there's got to be a more direct way to scratch this entrepreneurial itch than
mhm,
like doing this all for 50 hours a week and then having three other side businesses. Like, how can I really focus in and create the most impact? I started to realize that this entrepreneurial itch was my purpose. It was like part of my purpose, right? There was a mission behind it, and I got so much fulfillment when I got to work with an entrepreneur and help them grow their business. I was like, that feels just way more empowering to me than solving traffic problems. And traffic problems were a great thing to solve, and I feel like I did a lot of good work and improved safety and all that stuff. But yeah, it's like you
yeah.
said, if kind of incrementally it seems accidental, and then you look back at these dots, and I can very much see the through line. And
Yeah.
am very grateful that I had the courage at each of those kind of intersections to be like, I'm going to try this and I'm going to like pursue this opportunity. Maybe sometimes too many opportunities at once, but it's turned out really well for me.
So you said like you saw those opportunities that were there. Would you consider yourself a risk taker, or would you consider yourself risk adverse?
I would say I am not afraid to take a risk, but I do it in a conservative way. So probably a really good example of that would be making this transition from full-time engineer to full-time entrepreneur. That took me like over 2 years, right? So it wasn't like I just said, screw it, I'm quitting my job
Yeah.
and I'll figure it out. Like, I'm definitely not that. It was initially a slow build, and there was a point where it became much more rapid. So for a
Yeah.
couple of years I was like taking on these clients and kind of testing the water and figuring out what to charge and what am I actually good at, because I was doing everything like websites and emails and Facebook ads and Google My Business profiles, like, and coming up with like bundles of the month for meat for the butcher shop, like anything. I was trying to be a chameleon, jack of all trades.
Yeah.
So, but there was a moment in like this epiphany moment, and so it was summer 2017, and I had just basically just been I've been making progress, but it was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this another 2 years, right? I'm working a more than full time job, and I have a huge roster of clients, and I'm working all the time, and wanted to see my wife and kids a little bit more. But I was holding on to this engineering security blanket, right? Because it was wise to do so. That's what I guess what I'm trying to say is I was going to take the risk, but I was like pretty hard for me to let go of that. And at some point I realized like, oh my gosh, I can just try it. I can like go try this entrepreneurial thing for 3 months, 6 months. And then if I'm not good at it or I don't like it, I can just go get another engineering job, because I'm not losing my career because I'm bad at it. I'm choosing to try something different. And when I let go of thinking it was a permanent decision, it really freed me up. And then I went to my wife and my kids. I'm like, hey, I know I work a lot now. I'm giving myself to the end of the year. I've got a financial goal of how much I want to have saved so that I can make this transition wisely. And if I hit that goal, I'm quitting my job. And if I don't hit that goal, I'm going to have to set a different goal. I basically had two more than full-time jobs for that 6 month period. Was able to hit the goal though, and then had that freedom to then quit the engineering career. Some risk adversity, but ultimately I did make the leap, which most people don't do. So
Well, like you said, you built in the background. That's number one. And number two, you gave yourself a goal, a measurable goal. If you either hit it or you don't.
I went to quit. Two things happened the day I was really scared. I'd been with this one company for 8 years. They kind of hired me on to build this entire practice within a larger engineering firm. So I was like, I had hired every person that was ever in the group, and I was leading the group, and I was responsible for the business development. And so it was like, this is scary for me to come. And I felt like it was going to come out of nowhere. Like, never going
Did
to
you
expect
tell
it.
them? Did they know you were leaving, or did you just show up one day and
I
say,
mean, no, they didn't know I
yeah,
was leaving. And so I they probably got the clue when over Christmas. I'm like, I'd really like to meet with you, on January 2nd. And so I met with my branch manager, my immediate supervisor, and I told him, it's not you, it's me. Like, that's something I've been developing on the side, and I need a break from engineering. I'm not going to go to a competitor. You don't have to worry about me doing anything with clients, And his response was like, really happy for you. I'm the president of the Engineers Club. We need a new website. Would you like to build it? And so he gave me a project because at that time I was doing random marketing stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. So he gave me this wonderful relationship. And then they said, yes, obviously you can quit if you'd like, but let us digest this. And they got back to me just like a couple of days later and said, how would you like it if we just paid you a substantial hourly rate? Well, you'll lose your benefits because you're not going to be full time, and just work part time, and you'll help us make this transition and find your replacement. And it's like, great. So I actually freed up most of my time, got paid more per hour, got a new project out of it. Yeah, and it's just, but it's like by taking that, by being honorable to the relationship and thoughtful about the stuff I said I would do for them. I think I said, like, I'll stay for like 3 months. I know this is gonna be a transition, and but obviously I'll leave today if you guys are want that. But I think I just handled the relationship the right way and turned out like a total win-win for both sides.
Do you find that sometimes if you just let things go rather than trying to control the situation, that it flows in a way that you didn't expect, but it winds up being good in the end?
Yes, but I'm really bad at it. So I believe it, but practicing it is tough for me.
One of the best books I've ever read is called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And he talks about in that book just that, surrendering to the flow of life. And it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard when you want to control the outcome, control the situation. But the surrender comes in at it. In the surrender, it's not talking about just do nothing and sit back and somebody's going to put money in your bank account. It's about doing what you're supposed to do, what you feel called to do, but then allowing your life to take a left turn or a right turn and be okay with it.
Yeah, I have a couple experiences with this and thoughts, and being a Christian, part of my struggle with that is like having the faith that things are going to work out, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've read
Me
this
too.
book called Rise and Go from a guy named Corey Carlson. It's amazing, and it really met me in a place a couple summers ago where I was in another period of transition, and one of my big takeaways, there's a quote that's pretty common: "Let go and let God." I think that's helpful. And then the one that really made it practical to me was that God has the night shift, and this idea that I can work all day and doing the thing I need to do. Then at some point I got to like leave my office, turn off my computer, and then let God take care of the night shift. And like, I can't control it all anyway. So there's really no point in like worrying about things all the time. So I think in a spiritual way, that's helpful. That's a mantra I try to live by. And then just really practically, it's kind of a funny thing my coach observed is, my current business model is cohort based. So I'll fill up a group of entrepreneurs, 12 entrepreneurs in a mastermind group, and we work together for 90 days. So with that, the cycle of that, a group gets filled, and then, then you got to fill the next one and the next one, and there's some space in there. But inevitably, I'll get to some point where the program's approaching, and I'll have like 5 spots left, and my default response is just like, follow up with every lead, or like check in with my salesperson and like try to like control who gets those last 5 spots and push it. And what my coach has observed, she's like, every time when you get to this point where you're kind of starting to get a little stressed, whenever you like go work on a house project or you go golfing with your daughter, like you just completely let go of it, like people just flood in and fill the last spots. I'm like, that's actually true. So
There's that surrender.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
Like just
letting it
surrender,
go.
quit worrying about it. Like just have faith that whoever needs to be in there is gonna find it. They're gonna be there. You've done the work to generate the leads, and at some point you can't ultimately control, what happens at the end of the process. So
there are a ton of unknowns, and you have to be okay with the unknown, okay with you don't know what's coming next. Some people love that, and other people are like, I don't want to do that, and some people aren't meant to be entrepreneurs either.
Yeah, like my wife would never be in a million years want to be an entrepreneur, so she very risk averse, but now she understands the fulfillment, the financial reward. Now I've got this figured out and it's working really well. It's way better than engineering, but she always supported me and always said she believed in me and had faith in me. But yeah, whenever I was the sole breadwinner and I said I'm quitting my job in
Yeah.
6 months, like that wasn't
Yeah,
an
yeah.
easy
Yeah, that
conversation.
could be a little unnerving there, but
Yeah.
like we talked about before, you had built up a runway as well, and you could always go back. It makes me think of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, where he talks about people wanting to quit their jobs, and then you write out the fears, and then you write out well, what's the worst case scenario that can happen, and then you work into each of those. Well, if this bad thing happens, well, what can you do about it? Isn't that really what life is? It's just problem solving. Everything is figure outable. That quote hit me because it wasn't part of my thought process or repertoire that, yeah, wait a minute, I can figure that thing out. And when you make that mindset shift to realizing that there are opportunities and problems, but also every problem you can figure out some solution to solve it. It just, I don't know, for me it just kind of doesn't make things seem so bad if you know
Yeah.
you can figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, there's somebody out there who can figure it out. Hey,
Yeah.
going back to your situation where you have to find those 5 more clients and then your coach said, hey, why don't you just go play some golf or work on the house? It's going from grinding to
Hmm.
flow,
Yes.
right? So what are your thoughts on grinding it out and building things, because you've built quite a few companies versus flowing into it? How do you view it now?
It's definitely matured. So I feel like I've done almost everything the hard way, through kind of my whole life, and we won't have to get back in my whole family of origin story. But the way to summarize is I came from a very poverty, impoverished mindset. So a very scarcity, lack, impoverishment, like whatever. And then through a lot of the things we talked about, this process of a big part of my personal development has been through these career and business changes. And so I think where I'm sitting today, like my most recent business, is Seven Figure Leap. I literally, my coaching business had a literal 10x leap. Like it went 10x in a year. And so how does that happen? Well, it was definitely from a place of flow and abundance. But I still think that there are practical things you can do to influence that. And so my new podcast, which is called Seven Figure Leap, the intro to it literally says like, make quantum leaps in your business through smart strategies and rich relationships. And to me, that's the shortcut, is the relationships. So to me, and part of that is because I'm a community builder and I lead these mastermind groups, and so like it's really been important to me personally, but also as I witness so many other entrepreneurs from the seat I get to sit in, like that's where the quick insights come from. That's where the referrals or these just new levels of thinking. For me, that's happened most quickly in community. And so I do feel like you can get into flow state faster with the right with the right
Mm-hmm.
people around you. And that's something I did not have an appreciation for even 2 years ago. And now it's like the main thing I deliver for other people. And that's been really interesting to kind of like look back at my career and these businesses and how much each one accelerates quicker than the previous. And I'm sure part of that's experience, part of that's, having a network to draw from. But I think a lot of it is just being really intentional about investing in coaching strategy, or being a masterminds or leading masterminds and having those rich relationships surround me. I feel like that has just been the ultimate shortcut. So
Oh, cool. What gets you fired up about life now with all that you've created for yourself?
I'd say to me, it's really all about community and relationships. When I look at the areas I feel like I've had big forward leaps in my faith life, it's been in small group communities. And when I look at how I serve in my regional community, it's in a couple different key groups, right? And obviously my business is fed largely by groups. I have an ongoing mastermind I lead that fuels me, and that, so that's a 1 hour a week. We have a virtual call. That hour, outside of my family time in my business, that hour lights me up more than anything, right? I'm actually there to serve, like they're paying me to be there. But I come away so energized from that call because I'm getting to spend this kind of like communal time hearing the highs, lows, struggles, the real life of the entrepreneur. And I often have things I can speak into that, and then sometimes they're speaking into me. But just knowing that, like, wow, look, in the course of 18 months, not only do I have like my cohorts, but I've got this group that now is like totally bought into this experience, and they show up every week. We just met in person for the first time, which is a whole different level of experience. And so I'd say what gets me fired up is like, where is this going to be in another 3 years? Like it's because it's so cool right now, and it's very new in the scheme of things when you think of businesses. So
Yeah. So listening to you talk and listening to your stories, you have a common thread of you love to serve and community. Your business that you built, the 7-Figure Leap, is where you help entrepreneurs grow through telling their stories. So
yes.
let's take a small step backwards. How does someone, if they're listening to this, going, well, okay, I don't have a story. I have no compelling story. I don't really, I have a business. Maybe they have a business, maybe they don't, but they would say, I don't know what I would talk about. Where would you direct somebody to start?
Yeah, a couple different kind of practical places to start. One would be if they have a business that they've created and they did it on purpose, or even if they didn't in some cases. But like I would, part of what I do on my show when I interview entrepreneurs is I dig a few layers deep into why they are doing what they do, because they could be doing anything. It's like, why are you choosing to build this business, and why are you choosing to work with these clients? And there's almost always it's part of their value system. They may not have even realized it, but there's some core value that probably was developed in their childhood vacuums. There's something they lacked probably in their early part of their life that they're not fulfilling in others, and they may not even realize that. And then so tying themselves back to their own origin story of their business is often a big unlock moment. Like, oh yeah, like I do really believe in this, and that is probably why I ended up doing this, even though I didn't do it consciously, right? So that's a big part of it. And then another topic that could be an entire episode is like unique ability. So unique ability, it's a Dan Sullivan framework. He's a famous author and strategic coach. He's been coaching entrepreneurs for decades. And so, and I think he named it. I'm not even sure. I give him credit, but it is kind of what it sounds like. Like what in Sue is unique, and how does that influence not only how you've served your family, how you've raised your kids, how you show up in your community, but how you do your work, right? And that could be in a 9 to 5, that could be as an entrepreneur. So it's not specific to entrepreneurs, but what is specific to entrepreneurs is your unique ability is really going to be important in your business life because it's you, right? And so that's the definition. I'll kind of pause here, and you can ask me follow-ups. But I would love to talk about an experience I had last month that really like blew my mind around this whole concept.
Oh, sure, sure. And you know what? Do you find that people who operate in their superpowers often don't recognize it?
Yes,
And I think that's a big struggle, at least for me personally as well, because people have asked me like, "What's your superpower?" I'm like, "I don't know."
yes, that
I don't know where my zone of there's a couple
zone of
different
genius
words
would be
too.
a yes. Well, what I will say about that is not only is it like sometimes happen, it's almost 100% universal that you cannot name your own superpower, your own unique ability.
Hey,
I like
that's
to
good to hear.
just a simple analogy, like you're
Yeah.
sitting in your jar, only other people can read your label, right? And so you really can't do it. And the other thing that people start to realize is once you start getting really good at what you deliver to your clients, if you're a coach as an example, you can't coach yourself. Like I feel like I'm a really good coach. I can sit in the mastermind and lead it like the best in the world, but I can't do that for myself because I'm in my own head, and I just don't have the objectivity to do it. So one way to shortcut it is, or to find it and then to really refine it and believe it in a deep way, is to have a community speak it to you. Right. And this is something I just went through. So I've been meeting with this group for about a year, the 7-Figure Leap Mastermind. So they're all people that have been through my core 90-day program. And then some people choose after that, like, hey, I want to keep the party going. I want to keep building my business with this kind of community. And they love the mastermind. So we've been meeting virtually, many of us, for like a year. And all of them, at least with me, have been in an intensive 90-day experience before that. So like I, feel like we really know these people. They really know me. And so what was really interesting though is like we decided we're going to meet in person for the first time in Orlando I was speaking at a conference called Podfest, a podcasting conference. So I was like, hey, whoever can make it, why don't we come to Orlando? I'll get everyone like VIP access. And then I hosted a really cool dinner the night before the event started. But in preparation for that event, like I just, all these things started coming up, like kind of through the fourth quarter and into the beginning of the year, where people are asking me kind of privately in the group, like, what am I good at? Or like, how do you see it's my unique ability? And part of it's because we were talking about these frameworks and Dan Sullivan and, what's my zone of genius? And it was coming up on the calls quite a bit.
Yeah.
So what I did was I had everyone, I had a simple kind of Google form. I had every member, whether they're going to Orlando or not, commit to writing in their own form. It could be 3 words, it could be 3 paragraphs, but however they want to express it. Like, how do you see this other member's unique ability? And it was really interesting. So everyone did it independently. Then I was able to assemble those and curate them into a nice document. And then with the people that were in Orlando, I had it all printed off and I handed it to them as a gift. And I said, hey, I want you, actually, I gave it to them before the event so they'd have time while they were traveling to read through it. And then in the event, our mastermind experience was centered around, okay, Sue, you've heard from 14 other people, like about your unique ability and how they see it. Like, you distill it down now into like the through line. Like, what's the 2 to 3 word summary of what is your unique ability? And it was amazing. Like, people were crying. People are like, I feel seen for the first time in my life. Like,
Oh my
fully seen.
gosh.
You've given me the words. I couldn't get them. And it was amazing. And so just to kind of put a cap on that, for me, my distillation of all that, because I got a ton of feedback, because I know I'm the one person that knows everyone deeply. It was 2 things that you do really well, Dustin. You provide people clarity and you provide them connection. And so I was like, that's it. I'm a story brand guide. I love messaging. I love naming offers. And like, I love the whole idea of like giving you an insight. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I just kind of blew your mind and it's kind of intuitive and it's kind of part of, my training. And then once we like, I know exactly what I call this thing. And it's like, now I need to connect you to these who's, right? Like, that's the connection part. Like, now I'm going to reach into my network and be like, oh my gosh, now that you have this clarity, you need to know this, and this person, and they're going to really help you, expand your vision and grow your business. So that's kind of a fresh experience. It was extremely powerful for me, and obviously, for everyone else involved. And, not everyone has access to that directly, but, if you're in a group, that's an amazing place to get that feedback. You can get it from one individual, and it's going to be much more helpful than not getting it. And of course, you can go to your family and friends too. Just the last thing I'll say on this, because I thought it was really interesting, is I got the raw feedback from everyone and hadn't really processed it. I had my document and I handed it to my wife and I said, hey, read through this. Like, what do you think of this? And she's like, I believe this is how you are in your business, but I don't really see this as how you are at home. I was like, I kind of hurt a little bit. I was like, huh.
Wow.
So I read through it though, and as I was distilling it, I realized why. It was because the feedback and this is important for people, like, you got to think of the context that people are seeing you. And so in my context, all of these people were paying me to lead a mastermind. So they're using words like, you're a really good facilitator. You're great at curating amazing groups. And like, you lead these communities with so much care, and like, you're really insightful. And, again, my wife believed I'd deliver that at work, but I'm an introvert. Like, I'm not like going and building communities locally, and it's a really kind of an interesting dichotomy. So I got back from Orlando and I said, hey, I know you said this wasn't anything like me, but, and she was being a little bit joking. She was a little, not looking forward to me leaving town the next morning, but I said, I distilled it down though. It's clarity and connection. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're amazing at that. Like, like, you help our kids with so much clarity. And then like, you're always looking to connect all of our friends with the right people. You're like the guy that everyone knows at church. And so it was like, okay, yeah, clarity and connection. Yes. Not necessarily wearing the hat of curator or facilitator. That's kind of my work expression of that, but I have other expressions of it in different parts of my life. And that's what's really cool about unique ability, is it gets applied in different ways. So that was, I know it was like an essay on unique ability, but I just had to share that.
No, I think it was great. I love the picture of we are all in our own little jars and we can't see what's on the label, but everybody else can. I think that's so helpful, because in my journey in the last year and a half, people have asked me, or I have asked of me, hey, what are your unique abilities? And I'm like, I don't know. And my coach is Austin Lenny, he and I had, I'll never forget this. We had a text back and forth, and I was going to a conference. He said, go operate in your greatness. And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm great at. I don't see it. And his response was, when we operate in our greatness, and I would equate that to our zone of genius, our unique ability, when we're operating there in that, you don't see it. You just show up as you. But I truly believe, now that I started getting more in tune with who I am and through coaching, that you can get little glimpses of your greatness And it's how you feel on the inside when you show up. Like what you said, what lights you up,
Yeah.
when you're talking about community, when you're connecting those people, that hour that you spend is energizing to you. And I
Yeah.
think that's when we look for those moments, those are the ones where we are operating in our zone of genius, but it is hard to put it into words. And out of your story, what I love is that you are building community. These people feel safe inside this community. And then that's what allows them to be free to see the abilities in others around them. And when you don't have that kind of connection, it's really hard to find what that is. I mean, there's tests and stuff out there too, and I've done them. But my challenge is I read them and I go, okay, this is great, but how does this translate into something that I can do practically that I'm actually going to make money off of?
Yeah, I mentioned kind of the first part of what we did with this mastermind in Orlando. So we had a really nice dinner and scheduled for 3 hours. We were there for four and a half. Like it was really a powerful, just social experience. But the application side of it was like, great. Like now you distilled this down and you express it to everyone. Now let's mastermind around what you're going to do with it to grow your business in 2024. Right. So we
Yeah.
got really practical, like, hey, Dustin, if these are your unique abilities, what would you change about your delivery model or your marketing approach? Like, because, how does this apply to your business? And I think for anyone listening too, if you're like, wow, that would be such a gift, but like, I'm not in a mastermind. People don't know me that well. A really simple exercise that one of our members did before I decided to do this together is I know, cause I received one of the texts, he just sent like, I don't know, probably 10, maybe 15 texts to family and friends and people that know him from different social circles. And he basically was like, hey, I'm currently doing this program. I'd love to have 2 minutes of your time. If you could just respond back with like 3 words that you would use to describe me.
Mm.
And that was, it was a little different application, maybe not as much depth as what we did, but it gave him like these words, and it was kind of a word cloud, right? Like, well, this showed up the most frequently and this showed up the second most frequently. And when he told me what those words were, I was like, yeah, that totally is you, and I see you at a deeper level, but if I only knew you, casually, I would definitely say these are, you're, in his case, like wise and humorous. And so it's, again, not maybe as much depth, but it would probably be helpful for people because it's really just getting the insight into how other people see you. And sometimes it's scary to ask that question.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was going to
It's
ask.
really
So,
useful. So.
yeah. How do you help entrepreneurs or people in your mastermind navigate through imposter syndrome?
Well, I mean, one is focusing on the proof. So, the people I'm working with typically have had some level of success, right? They're not total beginners in their business. And so we'll focus on like, tell me about someone you've helped. I mean, one thing we do every week in our meetings is a win of the week, right? So it's starting with gratitude. That could be personal or professional. But I think just getting people ingrained in the habit of looking for the positive and being optimistic, that goes a long ways towards avoiding getting caught by imposter syndrome. So one thing I would say is like, we all have imposter syndrome. Like it's never going away. You just gotta, but you can deal with it in different ways. And so part of that's just like focusing on the proof. Like I've done this, I've got this result for people. I've got this credential, this education, whatever it is. Cause that's probably number one. And then number two would be this evolution we just talked about, like focusing not on what you lack, but like what you bring. Like, I may not have, I'm getting ready into like kind of a marketing partnership with a really big company. And I was like, look, guys, like I don't have a very big email list. I don't have nearly the platform you've built, but what I do have is, these really high quality relationships. I know that I can drive results and I have really good education I can provide your community. So that would have been an easy moment for me to be like, I'm not even going to talk to these people. They've got 100,000 people on their email list, and I feel small by comparison. But instead I was like, you know what? That's all true. And I'm not going to hide from that, but I do have things that would enhance their community because, that's my strength. And so I think, just looking for the positive instead of focusing on the things you don't have is a big part of it.
Yeah. Isn't mindset half the battle?
Oh yeah.
Like just trying.
Probably.
Yeah. 80% of the battle. What kind of mindset hacks or, things that you do to keep yourself operating at a high level of performance, because you do have several different businesses going and you're an entrepreneur. So what do you do to help yourself?
I mean, the main thing I do is honestly being plugged into the communities that I run. So that, as I mentioned, that recharges my batteries on a regular basis. I pray, I work out every day. I think there's a big physical component of having a positive mindset. And then the other thing I do is I take pretty quick, like, corrective action. So if I'm feeling down or I'm feeling doubtful, there's an app called Voxer, which is like an audio notes app, right? So I have a couple friends slash my coach who I'll just, hey, no need to respond to this, but I want to walk. I want to talk this out for like 5 or 10 minutes. You can delete it, but I need someone. I just want to share this, right? Same thing with my wife. I can do that. But just, for me, I'm a verbal processor. And so I know, like, if I'm in my own head, I need to talk it out. And I could be talking to myself. I leave myself voice notes sometimes. Like, it doesn't have to be received. Or often for me, it's more of a long prayerful walk where it's one way, or sometimes two way. It feels like conversation with God. Like,
Yeah.
I'm stuck with this. I'm feeling, I feel in this way and I want to feel this way. So I think that being proactive about it, and then very practically, there's two kind of like ongoing resources that I'll tap back into whenever I need them. One's called The Power of Positive Thinking. It's a big, long audio book. It's written a long time ago by a pastor and a guy with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, I think. And so it's not really for the content. It's just like I can start and stop that at any point in the book. And it like hits me with like, it's the power of positive thinking. So it kind of gets me back in a positive thought loop. And then there's another one. I listen to the audio version. It's a little book too. It's Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret, which is also science and faith. It's a little 30-minute audio. Back when I was going through some major opportunities and really wanted to shift myself into abundance thinking, I listened to it literally for 30 days straight. And it's got a little exercise where you make a post-it card with a goal and a Bible verse. And so, like, literally I have this sitting at my desk because I show people on video. And so, like, daily looking at that goal, and then daily giving myself space and working out and making sure I let God have the night shift and turn off my computer. So I feel like all of those are like tools in the tool belt that continue to level up my mindset. And then just being really honest when it's not there. Like, I'm having an off day. And so, what can I do to help correct that versus just letting myself spiral downward?
Yeah, I love that you said you try and course correct as fast as you can. I think that's really important. And knowing yourself and knowing that you're in that space that, hey, things are starting to go downward a little bit, and then, catching yourself and then realizing, it's okay, I'm not at my best. And I also have the power of choice to bring myself out of, hey, if it's not going well, I can turn this around too.
Yep.
It's okay. It's not going to be perfect. So now I'm going to turn around and spiral back up, which is what you were talking about that you do through exercise, meditation, walking. What are some things that you thought would be hard about growing businesses, but turned out that it wasn't? And then flip it. What's some things you thought would be easy and then wound up being more challenging for you?
It's a great question. So I'm trying to think of both at once. I can't do that. So
do one at a time. No, so you can't answer both at once anyway. So what do you think would be easy but wound up being more challenging?
Yeah, I'd say for me, it would probably be like systems. I'm an engineer, so I'm like, hey, I'm going to build these businesses very systematically and scalably. Whereas in reality, what has happened in pretty much every case is like I jump in and I build the airplane as I'm flying it. And so it becomes more stressful because I don't have as much systems built. I eventually get the systems built. I'm in a major process of that now, right? But for Seven Figure Leap, but like Seven Figure Leap happened before the systems were ready.
Yeah.
And so the sales came faster and easier than I expected, which I guess is the second part of the question, because I found like my niche and like my people. But then what was harder is like keeping up with it. I'm like, I feel I'm going to build this gradually, and like I'm, and then it's like, no, it's like it seems to happen in these like big inflection points where it's fairly gradual and then 10x leap, right? And then something that's going okay, maybe feels a little down, and then like a key relationship, partnership, or whatever, 10x leap, and it's like, great. Now I've been like, I'm not catching my breath enough in between to like make it feel sustainable. And so I think that's it. It's like this balance of like wanting to grow and take advantage of opportunity when it's there, but also not wanting to burn myself out in the process and not having enough systems of support, whatever, in place. So that's timely right now because I'm doing another course correction where it's like I'm hit another benchmark and I need more help. So like, who's the who?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. How do you deal with the 10x leaps?
Yeah, so a really good resource for this is there's a book called 10x is easier than 2x. I mentioned Dan Sullivan earlier, and it's co-authored by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. So, and that's where a lot of this unique ability and this stuff comes up. And so, in their definition of a 10x leap, it's not, it can be 10x like revenue, it could be, that sort of thing, but also can be 10x quality instead of like 10x quantity, as an example, right? And so, anyone's familiar with the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? So the whole premise of this 10x is easier than 2x is like you can get 2x like linear, boring, normal growth by you just do a little bit more of what you're already doing. But if you want to make a fundamental change, you want to make like a shift in the line, right? So people can't see my hands if they're on the audio, but instead of linear, if you want to have exponential or even like a quantum leap in your growth, you actually have to live in your 20% and give up the 80% that's not driving those results. And that 20% is by definition your unique ability. So like, how can I really double, triple, quadruple down into the things that I'm super effective at, and then either let go of, quit doing the other 80%, or find who's another book they wrote together. It's called Who Not How. Who can help me with the other parts so that I can focus on the things that I can drive results for in the biggest way. And so like people want 10x leaps because it's better, but like it requires massive change. And so it's also stressful. But like, and so I think the way I have dealt with this and try to deal with it is don't let me get too far down the road before I make sure I'm course correcting and getting the who's in place. So for me, a lot of that, like I don't have any full-time employees, but finding the right contractor help. Right before our call, I was talking to someone who might be a really good solution for me on like basically a software management solution, right? For pulling together all the things I've built. And that's because I think I would have at one point in my life considered myself very systematic. I'm actually really bad at building and maintaining my own systems. So like I need a who that can come basically just like take that off my plate. And I have now the financial ability to do that. And so that's the interplay, right? Is like investing versus reacting, being proactive versus reactive. And so I would say I'm not an expert in doing it comfortably, but I've been through it a couple different times now, and I am getting better at figuring it out. So
Yeah. Do you find it hard to like identify the 80% that you have to jettison and not do?
yes, it's
Yeah.
sometimes this is stuff you actually enjoy, but you're not that good at it, or it's falsely part of your. Well, here's the other thing. So a 10x leap is actually stepping into a future version of yourself, and this gets a little woo woo, but like. So you got to think not like Dustin right now, but like if I have this goal to do something in the next year, what would Dustin, who's already achieved this goal, what would his identity be? Like, what would he consider most important for him to be doing? And so there's obviously a gap there. And so yes,
It's like
I
reverse engineering.
it is. It's reverse engineering. So there's the challenge of actually doing the thing, but the other challenge is what we talked about before is understanding what your 20% is. You're probably not very good at identifying it, and that's why like the unique ability exercise is so important. It's like once you both understand and accept and believe this is actually my zone of genius, this is where I really need to spend 80% of my time because that's going to drive all the results, right? Like then it becomes like not only uncomfortable to continue to do the 80%, but you start to really get excited because you can see the bigger vision. You can see what the 10x leap would do for you, and you start to desire it. And then to me, that then drives the action. Now, people who probably do this the right way are probably like putting the pieces in place and then leaping. I tend to like leap
I
and
don't know. I mean, is there really a right way or a wrong way? I guess you
I
could
don't think so.
accelerate it, but huh?
I don't think there's
Is
a
it?
right and wrong way. I guess
No, I don't
I was
think so.
kind of tongue in cheek saying like I tend to
Yeah.
like get pulled into these leaps and then be like, oh crap, like well, what just happened? And now like I need to go like put the pieces back in to feel comfortable again in the new place. So
Yeah, but you know what though? I want you to be encouraged. Yes, all that stuff looks like it's all pieces and you jumped right into it, but the point is you figure it out.
yes,
You just everything's figure outable, right?
the experiment, right? They're all small bets. They're all
Yeah.
small experiments,
Yeah.
and
Well, I feel like
that's
sometimes
important.
when you hear the word entrepreneur, at least my brain anyway, goes to solopreneur. You're out there on an island all by yourself. You mentioned the word belief in what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about believing in yourself. And if you have any, examples or experiences where lack of belief caused something versus having belief in what you do.
Yes, another deep question, but I would
I
say,
I'm sorry, I love going into
no,
the
I love it
weeds.
too. It's just I try to hold my verbal processing back from going on and on. But I would say, like, for me, belief is a really interesting word because it kind of ties to proof or evidence, right? And so, again, having an engineering background and kind of that scientific background where, like, for it to be real, you have to show me the proof. Well, once you have the proof, it's easy to believe, or it's not easy. It's easier to believe, right? But like before you've created the outcome, it's hard to believe you can do it. So that, at least that's been my experience. So, like, practically speaking, I would say, like, I got into podcast guesting to sell snack sticks. I had a belief that like this would work because I saw other people doing it. So I think modeling is a big part of it. It's like they're doing it. I bet I could do it for my thing. And if I do it right, I bet I can make it work. I had full belief in that. The first person ever reached out to me and said, "Hey, I heard you on this podcast. Can you show me how to get on podcasts and make money with it?" I'm like, I don't know. I did it for myself, but I'm not sure I have the ability to teach it. And so I didn't charge them very much money, but I felt I did charge them money because I'm like, and I told them, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I will work with you and let's see what happens, right? And so that built belief though, because then they did get a result, and then the next person and the next person. And I ended up doing 20 of those one-on-one coaching engagements for increasing amounts of revenue, and I start to really build belief. I'm like, I'm good at coaching. This system works. If they show up and do the work, like they'll get a result. But that took a year. And then,
Yeah.
I was in a mastermind group and I was like, started to open my eyes into like, well, what if I led something like this? And I'm like, I could never do that. Like I didn't have the belief, but I had someone in the mastermind group I was in. I had two different people tell me, like, as a peer to peer member, like, you're really insightful. Like, you're really good at like you're good at this, even though you're not the leader. I feel comfortable with you. I feel really connected to you. You're really good at it, whatever. That built some belief. So I think modeling other people, then having peer to peer feedback, and then once you actually drive the result for a client, if that's your business model or you sell the product or whatever you do, then the belief really starts to grow because like, well, now it's actually happening. And so now I've got 75 people that have graduated my program and all give me, no negative feedback, many video testimonials. Like I have a lot of belief in this program. Like I've
Yeah.
got a guarantee now with it. Like, and I would never have a guarantee the first go because I was like, I think it'll work. And I try to be a very transparent and open person. So, but now I'm like, tell me a little bit about you. Okay, yes, like this 1,000% will work. There's a complete ROI
Yeah.
guarantee, which is a great place to be in business because now I kind of have an irresistible offer for the
Right,
right,
right, right.
the
Well,
right
it's
people.
and it also goes along with success leaves clues. But we can't be successful if we don't try and we don't put the first one out there and
True.
then the next one and the next one. And I'm glad you put a time frame in there for a year. Like it took you a year to build this up. And sometimes we think, oh, I should be an overnight success overnight.
Yeah, it
And
was a
one of
year
my,
for the one-on-one coaching, and then
yeah,
then it was like 9 months to have the
9 months
courage to
more.
launch the mastermind. Then I've been doing that for 18 months. So overall,
Hmm.
it's been like 3 years. But
Well, my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes is it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
yes, 100%. Yeah, I
Shoot.
did my first digital marketing in 2009. So,
Mhm.
that's a long time ago, especially in internet in internet years. It's what, 15 years. So 15 years I've at least been dabbling in like marketing and digital marketing. And yeah, so but
Looked a lot different back then.
there's no way I could do what I do now had I not started, like you just
Yeah.
said, and tried something for the first time. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Go out there and try it. And I think also there's this idea out there that you don't want to fail at something.
mhm.
And like failure is just another opportunity to learn. It's not a
Yeah,
failure. I don't even like the word failure anymore. We're either learning or we're winning. And
I agree.
and
Yeah, I
and
think
yeah.
the only failure to be cautious of is a fatal failure, right? And that
Right.
there aren't many of those though. That's like the whole idea. These aren't permanent decisions. Like, and that's just the practice. To me, that's the responsible way to approach things. But like you said, what's the worst case? And realistically, what's the worst case? Like if that actually happened, what would what would we do? Like, it's not
Yeah.
probably going to kill us, right? Now, there are fatal flaws. I mean, you can jump
Yeah.
off a cliff and there are consequences, but I think, yeah, in most of like business context, yeah, I would agree. There's really not, it's not failures. It's just experiments
Yeah.
and learnings.
And then surrounding yourself with people who are where you want to be accelerates the process and then also helps you not to make some of those errors.
Yes.
And even if you have a community with you as well, you're still going to make your own mistakes because everybody's unique anyway. I mean, even if you put 10 people who are trying to build the same thing on their own, you're going to have 10 slightly different outcomes
Oh yeah.
at the
Yeah.
end.
Every,
You know,
everyone's unique. Right. And so,
right.
and the way I work is I actually choose, like, every mastermind group, those 90-day programs, like, everyone in there does a different thing. So they're in a different industry, they do a different service or a coach or whatever. There could be a health coach, a marriage coach, an email marketer, business consultant. And so, of course, they're going to have very different versions of what we build together because they have different business models in some cases. But what's really awesome about that is there's so much creative energy because they all see the world differently and they've all been trained to see like offers in a certain way or sales funnels in a certain way. And then like you cross pollinate these industries. It's really powerful. That's probably like, I think that's one of the secrets to why this has worked so well is I
Yeah.
don't, it's harder to market, but I purposefully stay out of pigeonholing myself into one industry. So if I did podcast guesting only for e-commerce stores, like, that's easy to market. But if I have one e-commerce and one, of this and one of that, that's harder to market because I don't stand in one marketplace and talk to one group of people. But the experience is so much more rich when they come in that
Mhm.
it's worth it. So
Yeah. But you're also really skilled at that too. Because as we've been talking, I've been listening to the common thread in a lot of what you do is it's really problem solving at the end of the day. And it doesn't really matter what the industry is. And I can kind of tell that being in different buckets actually excites you and it keeps you from getting bored.
yes.
I mean, I know it would be for me too. I would rather find the common thread of everything rather than trying to do the same thing over and over and over again. So I think that's the beauty of what you built. And it also gives you the ability to help anybody who walks in the room
Yeah.
rather than just being specialized.
Yeah. So instead of me having to go build a different business every year to stay interested, I just get to help people with all different types of businesses in the way that I like to help. And yeah,
Right,
I think you
right.
you
And that's
definitely nailed
really,
it. So
yeah, and that's really cool too, because, and it shows that what you've built does have a common thread that would be applicable across all different types of businesses. So I think
yeah,
that's
I
really
can see
neat.
myself, right now I'm working with entrepreneurs, mostly solopreneurs, with some level of success but I want to continue to serve that market. I find it extremely interesting and energizing, but I could certainly take this same knowledge and go do consulting at a corporation. Like,
Yeah,
I can see the through line
yeah.
there, even though it's a
And you
completely
may do,
different
and you
market.
may do that someday,
Yeah, and I would
and
be
that's,
interested in that. I'm a story brand guide. There's a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and so I've been around him. And what's really interesting is, like, he built this whole certification program aimed at entrepreneurs. And then when you hear him talk, he'll throw in, he's like, yeah, they flew me out and I was consulting on this presidential campaign about, their storytelling or whatever, their tagline or whatever. I'm just like, that's really cool. Like, he built the core thing. He still like stands for that. But like, he can go do like this kind of one-off special projects because he's built the business to
mhm.
fuel that and the credibility, obviously the status to do that. And I'm like, I could do that. Like that. I
Yeah,
think that would be really
yeah.
fun because,
Nothing is permanent.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
think when you talk to people who have been in the entrepreneurial space for decades, like decades, and then you take their story and then you watch the progression of it, they rarely stay in the same spot.
Yeah.
There's always a common thread. Well, as we wrap up, I like to ask all my guests the same three questions. We already hit the first one: book or resource, gap in the gain. We mentioned 10x. You had a couple other ones in
Yeah,
there.
there's a trilogy that I would recommend. It's the Dan
Okay.
Sullivan, Ben Harley trilogy. So we mentioned 10x is easier than 2x. That's actually the newest one. You can read them in any
Mm-hmm.
order though. Who Not How is the other one we mentioned, and then the gap and the gain. The gap and the gain is basically this idea of you should measure progress backwards, not forwards, because the
Mm-hmm.
forward horizon line, you never catch it. So I love those three books. I just read them. I discovered the whole thing in like the last year,
Yeah.
and I highly recommend people listen to the audiobooks because in the audiobooks you get Dan Sullivan, who's like an 80-year-old just wealth of knowledge. They just kind of talk about the chapter, and he has all these like amazing rich stories. And just to me, it's like Ben Hardy teaches it like a college professor, and then you get like the homegrown version from Dan Sullivan himself. And I think the audiobooks are amazing.
They're great. I've read all three too. They're fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. But, and you find you actually have to go back to them from time to time, because sometimes you wind up living in the gap and you don't realize that you're there. And it's like, oh, damn, I was in the gap again. I got to get out of there to get into the gain. And then the 10X is easier than 2X. Blew my mind when I read it the first time. And now that I'm on this journey, it's like, you just reminded me actually through our conversation, I probably should pick that up and at least read the highlights to remind myself what it was that was in there in the first place.
Yeah, they're deep cuts. So.
Yeah, they are. They are. What's one question or topic that you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Oh man, we definitely touched on it, but we didn't really go to the core of like the mastermind experience. Like why do masterminds? What's it mean? How do you build an effective one, and what can it do for you? Because I would say that's when I talk about building relationships, I would say getting into this world of participating in masterminds and then leading them. That's been kind of the secret weapon that really, I had my first exposure to that in 2022, applied it at the end of 2022. And as I mentioned, then had a 10X leap in my business revenue. So yeah, masterminds. Yeah. It's a whole nother episode though. So.
Okay. Well, you can come back and we'll talk about masterminds, because I'm curious about them as well, and the role the community plays and what they can do for people. I've been at masterminds. Actually, I was just at one this weekend. I was with 7 other ladies, and it was awesome. And you walked away with just rich conversations, and you make new friends, and the connections that are there. It's amazing. And then you get to know people better too, rather than just having a one-off conversation.
Yeah. And it's, if they're curated well and they're facilitated well, I think having any group of people in a room is useful, but then like, if you really want to get like super great results, like having obviously the right fit, I think it's great to have like a unified goal that you're looking at together. But yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you got to enjoy that. I have to hold myself back from being in too many, but I do get a lot of energy from it. And
I do too. You just get so stoked for them, and you just walk away.
Sometimes like you're talking about in person, and all of mine have been virtual, except for we had this one in-person experience last month, and that made me want to do that more. So that's the thing with, if it's done right, it doesn't really matter what the format is, right?
Well, people, so as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
I think I would text 10 of your family and friends and ask them what makes you unique. I think that you'll get a lot of unexpected insights from that. And I think it would be really fun, and it will help you both personally and professionally. And it takes like 10 minutes to make that ask.
Love it.
If you need an excuse, say, I was listening to this podcast and this guy said, I need to do this today. And so that's why I'm doing it. I always let people use me as an excuse in my program. So.
Oh, that's great. Dustin, how can people find you?
Yeah, they can go to sevenfigureleap.com/playbook. If they're into podcast guesting, there's like a full-on, very valuable set of tools there. They can do everything from calculate the revenue that would be generated for their business through podcast guesting, the email that I send to get on shows, and that we give clients the templates. They can literally copy and paste that. And there's a bunch of case studies on there that are of people who we've worked with, and kind of the before and after, and what we changed in their marketing and their business strategy to fuel their growth. So yeah, so sevenfigureleap.com. So it's LEAP, sevenfigureleap.com/playbook, and they can get access to that for free.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time. This has been awesome.
Yes,
love it.
Awesome. I appreciate the time and the space to think big and talk about some of these deep concepts. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.